Welcome to the third and final installment in the Shadowbringers Healers Initial Thoughts series. This video isn't meant to be a guide and shouldn't be taken as one. It's just my initial thoughts and experiences playing Astro from 70 to 80, and the changes I feel the class needs from my perspective. My view on it is also one from a raid optimization point of view, so some things may not apply to the average player. Astrologian has always been a job that has had a focus on precise planning and management of key cooldowns, like Earthly Star's buildup, collective small radius, and essential dignities increase in potency based off of missing health. This aspect of the job has required a more calculated playstyle and deeper understanding of the fights to get the most value out of this job's kit. This fact is further emphasized in the post-Shadowbringers changes. Let me preface this by saying Astro itself is not a bad healer, but when compared to White Mage and Scholar, there's a few glaring issues. More on that in a bit. When playing Astrologian, I had a lot of fun during trials and boss fights, planning out my heals, choosing between 4 and 6% Divination in the opener, and managing my DPS in the spaces between heals felt fantastic. But doing wall-to-wall pulls in dungeons was some of the worst experience I've had on the job, especially when compared to White Mage and Scholar. Low impact heals forcing you to use your GCDs more, Divination being cut in half made pulls feel longer, and a lower DPS output and poor coordination in Duty Finder made skills like Earthly Star, Collective Unconscious, and Celestial Opposition feel harder to use with the chance they'd miss their intended target. It feels like Square Enix wanted Astro to have weak off GCDs, so they had to rely on GCD heals more often than the other healers. If this was intended, they hit their mark. Looking at their new toolkit, 2 out of 3 of the new abilities they got rely on GCD heals, while some of their old abilities like Collective Unconscious and Celestial Opposition got nerfed with lower potencies, while also losing another healing ability, which is Lady of Crowns, due to it no longer healing. Essential Dignity takes its place at 78 though. Even switching to Nocturnal between pulls to get a shield up and then switching back to Diurnal wasn't enough to keep up with the incoming damage as well as the other 2 healers could. Thematically, the changes to Astro are fine, but when you're forced to GCD heal more than the other healers in one pull than they have to do throughout the entire dungeon, it feels pretty awful in comparison. While the 80 dungeons did feel a little bit better from a healing perspective than the previous leveling dungeons, I still felt like I was healing more than I was on the other healers. I think leveling the other 2 healers first really shined a light on the problems that I have with Astro's toolkit. Before you post a comment saying, "So you have to heal now?" Hear me out. I don't have an issue with GCD healing, I'm just bringing attention to the differences between the 3 healers. White Mage gets a damage return from healing with their FFXIV spells, which makes using them feel smooth, and Scholar straight up doesn't have to GCD heal at all with their powerful off GCD toolkit. In comparison, Astrologian is like the worst of both worlds. To highlight some of these issues, let's compare its toolkit to its most similar job, White Mage. They have Asylum, which is 980 potency, Assize, which deals 400 potency in healing and damage, Tetra, which heals for 700 potency, Divine Benison, which is a 500 potency shield, Benediction, which heals the players to full HP, and Temperance, which reduces damage taken by 10% for 20 seconds, as well as increasing their healing spell potency by 20%. Doesn't look like anything special, right? Let's also not neglect the FFXIV skills. While they may be on the GCD, they aren't a complete DPS loss like Astro heals are, due to them giving access to Misery, which can be a gain on large pulls. When we look at Astrologian, we have Earthly Star, a 720 potency heal, Collective Unconscious, which is a 250 potency heal, plus 10% mitigation for 5 seconds, assuming you use it efficiently, Celestial Opposition, which is a 400/250 potency heal depending on the sect you are in, 2 Essential Dignities with a base potency of 400 that scales the lower the HP of the tank, Celestial Intersection, a 525 potency ability in the form of a 150 heal and 375 shield in Diurnal, or a 150 potency heal and 400 potency regen in Nocturnal. Horoscope, which is 100 potency by itself or 400 potency when you use a Helios. Neutral Sect, which is a 20% healing boost to spells and gives you access to both Diurnal and Nocturnal effects at the same time. And Sinistry, which increases the on-hit heal of spells by 40%. Looks pretty comparable to White Mage at a glance, but there are more factors at work. With the introduction to the new HP scaling, Benediction's potency, assuming you use it at 1 HP, is around 4000-ish potency. Even if you use it when the tank is at 20% HP, you're still looking at a 3000 something potency heal. You'd have to combine Astro's whole toolkit to even get something close enough to value that one skill. White mages also have another tool in their kit that makes them superior, the Stun Unholy, which lasts for 7 seconds over 3 uses. That 7 seconds of time could be equal to hundreds or thousands of potency depending on the size of the pole. Astro doesn't have something like that anymore. It used to have something similar with Celestial Opposition being a stun, and its loss makes me kind of sad. All that being said, I don't mind the GCD healing aspect of the job, but a lot of its main functions feel clunky and awkward to use. Sleeve draw feels horrible. The fact that it doesn't just give you seals and cards right away makes it really awkward because you have to save life speed for it. This means you cannot use life speed for healing, recovery, MP, or movement unless you want to suffer a pretty massive raid DPS loss by losing cards during your divination window and pushing your card CD back. This is probably my biggest issue with the job right now. If there's one thing they changed about Astro, it's changing sleeve draw's interaction. Another big thing I have an issue on with Astro is the 3-minute cooldown on divination. That's way too long. There have been countless times where I have all 3 seals and divination still has 100 to 110 seconds left on its cooldown. I feel like it's almost impossible to not have these seals with how redraw works currently, unless you misplay really badly. I would much rather them decrease the cooldown to 2 minutes along with sleeve draw and decreasing their personal DPS if need be, increasing the fun of utilizing the skills and making smarter decisions than the monotonous mess it currently is. Decreasing it to 2 minutes would also help it synergize with lightspeed a bit better, as well as making decision making for divination more interesting. I also had an issue with the amount of buff icons you can get on Astro bloating your buff bar because everything has a different icon. That was a pretty long introduction. Now let's move on to the skills, gimmicks, and changes of the job. Cards have changed pretty significantly since Stormblood. Cards are now split into a 3-3 design and then further split into a 2-2-2 design. What I mean by this is that 3 cards, Balance, Spear, and Arrow, give a 6% damage up buff on melee DPS and 3% for other rolls. While the 3 other cards, Bull, Ur, and Spire, give a 6% damage up buff on ranged DPS and a 3% for the other rolls. This is further split into a seal system which you need to obtain to use divination. Balance and Bull give a solar seal, Arrow and Ur give a lunar seal, and Spear and Spire give a celestial seal. Your end goal is to try to get 3 different seals by the time your divination comes off of cooldown. Personally, I've enjoyed this system more than the old system. The on-the-fly reacting aspect is way more enjoyable to me. My only issue being divination having an absurdly long cooldown that it just leads to turning cards into lady or lords for upwards of 60 seconds. Celestial Intersection is probably the best skill Astrologian has gotten in Shadowbringers and made my leveling experience somewhat bearable. In Diurnal, it's a 150 potency on hit heal and a 375 potency shield totaling 525 potency. In Nocturnal, it's a 550 potency total heal with a 400 potency regen instead of a shield. This helps White Mage and Astro compositions close the gap between Scholar by having a regen in Nocturnal, which was a huge issue for them in Stormblood due to Scholars having Embrace. Horoscope is also better than I expected it to be if I'm being honest. It could use a little work like extending the duration to 30 seconds instead of 20, but overall I think it's good. Even though it requires a GCD to get the 400 potency effect, you can still use it without one, it's just 100 potency instead. This may seem weak, but adds up over the course of an encounter due to it only being a 60-second cooldown. Think of it as Plenary, where it's a nice little add-on to your heals, except it's off the global cooldown and is free to use. Let's take a fight like Innocence EX. In a coordinated environment, you wouldn't use Horoscope outside of the downtime after adds if it required a GCD because you just wouldn't need it. But it has a use now because of that tiny heal without proccing Horoscope Helios. One thing I see a lot of Astros not doing is using Horoscope in dungeons. In between pulls, you can pop a Helios to proc its full effect, and use it as a free 400 potency off GCD heal at the start of a pull. This helps maintain the tank's HP. Neutral Sect is godlike when you need it for on-the-spot healing and when you know you'll need to use healing GCDs, but bad when you don't. Because Neutral Sect only works on GCD heals, which you actively try to minimize in this game at an optimization level, When there are fights with no GCD healing required, the skill is left on the back burner outside of downtime scenarios. Let's take a fight like Midgard Sommer. Even though you wouldn't use a GCD heal during uptime, you could pop neutral sec before the boss becomes targetable again during the downtime and get a powerful regen and shield up without actually losing any damage. An important note to add is that the neutral sec shields do stack with outside sources such as Galvanize if you're in Diurnal, and can lead to pretty huge shield values when paired with Recitation Adlo Deploy. When you use neutral sec in Nocturnal though, these shields do not stack. Essential Dignity got 2 chargers in Shadowbringers and greatly increased my quality of life after reaching level 78. Aside from that, it's just the same skill as before, a 400 potency base heal that scales to 1000 potency at 1 HP. I'll put these next 2 together because they might as well be the same ability. Divination and Sleeve Draw. Good idea but bad execution. Divination itself is a fantastic skill idea, but its long cooldown combined with Sleeve Draw's new effect requires many off GCD slots, which you need light speed to handle optimally. Because Divination and Sleeve Draw share the same cooldown, you're going to want to use them together to put out as many buffs as possible during raid burst windows. You can get up to a 14.48% damage increase stacking Lord and Lady cards with Divination, which is a pretty huge DPS increase, which will also stack multiplicatively with other raid buffs. Divination also feels really clunky pre-Sleeve Draw, which you gain at level 70, because you can't use your first Divination until 60 seconds into a fight. And while I don't expect to see the balance around low level content, I think it would be a good idea to make it so you get Sleeve pretty close to when you unlock Divination as they synergize with each other. Sleeve Draw itself feels pretty bad to use, at least to me. I don't like how after the initial use, optimal use of Sleeve Draw just becomes some ability you use to gain Lords and Ladies for Divination buff windows. It feels like complete fodder just pulling a card just to Minor Arcana it, which is probably due to the amount of time between Divination windows, and the chances of you not pulling 3 seals is already pretty low. I'm not sure how they would change it to be satisfactory to me, but maybe the 2-minute change would also benefit this aspect as well, making it so you had less chances to pull that 6%, so you would actually use cards, or at least 1 or 2, just to gain some foundation since you would have less time to get said seals. Collective Unconscious has been nerfed pretty significantly, going from a 750 potency heal that could be extended to a 250 potency heal that can't. Mitigation is the same as it was before, only being 5 seconds if you click and go. This skill needs a buff, whether it goes to 500 or 750 potency, it does not matter. It just needs some sort of love because 50 potency a tick on a 90-second cooldown feels really bad. Some could argue it's also a mitigation source, and while it is, the aspect of it is extremely lackluster, having to hold it versus Temperance and Soil being passive sources. Celestial Opposition is another skill that could be more desired. A 400 potency heal in Diurnal and a 100 potency heal and 150 potency shield in Nocturnal? Am I reading that right? For a 2-minute cooldown, this ability is pretty disappointing. On top of its already lackluster potency, its radius of effect is incredibly small, and I found myself missing heals on players who I couldn't communicate with. It also lost its stun effect, which may not mean too much in raids, but in dungeons was pretty nice, as well as losing its buff extension effect. This skill needs a buff in both Diurnal and Nocturnal because the potency on this is pretty unacceptable for a 2-minute cooldown. I don't have too much to say about Lightspeed that I haven't already said. The skill itself is good, but having to hold it for Sleeve Draw windows to use it in an optimal way feels bad. Sinistry was changed to 2 minutes. I actually have no idea why they did that because I don't think it was that strong at 90 seconds. One thing I have noticed, and this is for Stormblood players as well, is that very few people seem to know that if you use Sinistry on a tank and heal the same tank you put Sinistry on, it's a 40% increased healing effect for the on-hit potency of the spell you use. It turns Benefic 2 into a 980 potency heal, which is pretty crazy if you know you need to do a GCD heal. Unfortunately, this does not work on off GCD heals and only affects the on-hit potencies of single target heals. This means it has no effect on the regens or shields of aspected Benefic. Because of the 2 drawbacks, there are very limited situations where this becomes useful in a high-end group, but can be nice as a little boost to spells. Aspected Helios got the Medica 2 treatment. cutting its duration in half but the potency being the same overall. One thing that's interesting is that the on-hit heal potency got nerfed to 100 whereas before it was 200. On a side note, technically Aspected Helios got nerfed, because while its potency stayed the same, it no longer has the healing increase effect from the sects. Aspected Benefit got some love in more ways than one. First, its duration got reduced by 3 seconds but got buffed overall. It's now a 1200 potency flat GCD heal. Secondly, its MP cost got cut down by quite a bit. Before it cost 1440 MP, which was just as much as an AoE heal. Now it just costs as much as a Benefic. A pretty welcoming change because the MP cost before was way too unreasonable. Benefic got the same treatment as Physic and Cure, becoming a 1.5 second cast. I found myself utilizing this a lot more than its equivalents in dungeons to manage my MP, as I found myself running into some issues when using Gravity with the amount of GCD heals I had to do in the earlier dungeons. Benefic 2 and Helios had their potencies buffed, but it's more or less the same when you add in the sect potency they lost with the removal of them. Overall, Astrologian has some pretty glaring issues that I think need to be addressed. If it's intended to have lower potencies than the other healers, then that needs to change. I personally think that having a weaker toolkit where you have to rely on your partner to pick up your slack isn't good design for a healer. While you could argue that it would be fun to optimize in a group on the higher end, in a casual or pug setting it would be a recipe for a disaster. Some of the other issues that I have with the job are the Divination and sleeve draw and light speed interaction, and having a high skill cap potential for cards but poor reward for the work. Those are probably my 3 main complaints for the job. Even with these issues, Astrologian is not a detriment and can clear content pretty comfortably. While they may lack healing power in dungeons, they are perfectly fine in 8-man content and have more than enough tools for the current content. Hell, even when I was doing trials I had way more fun on it than the other 2 healers just because of all the busy work going on. While I know this isn't for everyone, if you enjoy a high CPM healer then Astrologian is probably the one for you. Without knowing the nature of the future encounter design, it's hard to say how Astro will adapt, but to me it feels like it will lag behind if there's any sort of intense healing requirement without a buff to some of its off GCD potencies. There's a really good foundation for the class in its current state, and with just a few tweaks it could become truly stellar. With its beautiful animations and meticulous planning nature, Astrologian will be an ideal class for the analytical and calculated players, or anyone who likes pretty flashing lights. If you guys want any more information on Astrologian, there are helpful people in the Balanced Discord that would love to help. To reiterate, this is not a guide, this is not me telling you how to play the job, this is just my feelings on the job playing it from 70 to 80 and doing the EX trials. Thank you for watching, and peace out. My next video will be melee, one of the melees. I'm not sure which one yet, probably Dragoon, we'll see. But again, thanks for watching, peace out, bye.